Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video first look and a quick review of the S6 Mini Smart Android Pico Projector. This one retails for $175, a little bit pricey but also competitive with other Android projectors on the market. So it has a full operating system embedded inside, although you can also mirror content from a smartphone or a laptop wirelessly and project it onto a display. So in terms of specifications, it has a fairly typical resolution. The output resolution is 854 by 480, although it supports video files or it can play back files up to 1080p resolution without any issues. So it's not going to be an actual 1080p output for the lens. That's something to quickly point out. As with most Pico projectors, it's going to be great on battery. It has a 4,800 milliamp hour capacity battery, which charges up in under 4 hours and gives you a roughly 2.5 hours of continuous video playback before you need to recharge it. And it has a 1,500 lumen output, which is average again for a Pico projector. This means that it's energy efficient and very visible under low light and indoor conditions, but if you're outdoors and in direct sunlight, the image quality will seem a bit more washed out. Again, it has embedded hardware in terms of Android version 4.4, and in terms of specs, we have 1GB of RAM coupled with 8GB of built-in flash storage. Flash storage, of course, is expandable because you can pop in your own memory card or plug in a hard drive that's loaded up with its own media, and it will read that up without any issues. So that's just some built-in specs that runs pretty well for some light web browsing and some light gaming if you don't want to connect a phone or a computer. So otherwise, again, you can see it's very small, lightweight, and easy to take with you, and other specifications include built-in Wi-Fi. It supports up to 5G wireless, and there's also Bluetooth that can be used to connect a wireless mouse. So inside the packaging, which is fairly generic looking, we have the projector unit itself, which we'll take a closer look at in a second. Other key accessories include the remote, which isn't an air remote, so you can't actually wave it in the air and expect a cursor to pop up on screen. However, it works pretty well. It's fairly sensitive, and you can tap up, down, left, right to navigate through the UI, which has been optimized for a projector. It offers Kodi for playing back local videos and streaming videos as well. Power on off, there's mute controls, volume controls, and also home controls, and there's also a little bit of a tab at the bottom for connecting it to a lanyard. The very bottom here, it takes two AAA batteries, which is not included in the packaging. And there's also a mini tripod that you can use to attach onto the rear of the projector for attaching it at various angles for showing content on the screen. So you can project images anywhere from 20 inches, a very small display, all the way up to 120 inches without that many problems. I've always been a huge fan of Pico projectors, and this is no exception. I find that they offer surprisingly good video quality for the size compared to regular kind of lens projectors and low-cost projectors from Shenzhen, China. They tend to perform a little better for around the same price point, which is why I recommend these quite often. The user manual here is pretty well documented in full color and tells you how to connect it with various devices. Something I want to point out very quickly is that although this projector has an HDMI port, this is an HDMI output and not an input. So you can't actually connect a laptop directly by plugging it into this port. Instead, you have to connect a laptop wirelessly using some built-in software that they've loaded onto the Android operating system. Instead, this HDMI port is for connecting the projector into a traditional television, and that transforms the projector into a regular Android TV box, where you can turn a regular TV into a smart TV by connecting it to the internet and then watching Netflix or YouTube, stuff like that. So it's a two-in-one design. However, you do lose the ability for a direct input for HDMI. So taking a look at the hardware, again, it is very well constructed. It's pocketable, similar to a 5.5-inch phone like the Oppo Find 7 that you see here in terms of its overall dimensions, although it's made out of plastic, so it does feel a little bit lightweight. You get the same controls as a remote on the front of the projector, which correspond to left, right, up, and down navigational keys, and they're pretty tactile and responsive controls. There's also power on-off mode keys and back keys. On the very side here, you have access to two different controls. You can slide it to the TF mode so that if you pop in a micro SD card directly onto the projector, it doesn't load up the Android operating system. It boots into this quick operating system just for viewing back your images or your stuff loaded onto a USB thumb drive, so that doesn't take quite as long to fully load up Android. Putting it to the right will load up the regular Android version 4.4 operating system. Over here, there's a focus bar, which You can tap on and scroll through to get a more focused view. You can kind of see the lens adjusting itself depending on how far away you are from the screen. The very top here features just, again, some ventilation grills. The side also features a 3.5mm port for connecting into a speaker. Even though there is a built-in speaker, it's a little bit tinny and muffled just because, again, the projector itself is very small. There's also a proprietary charging port, and there's the two USB inputs, and finally a speaker and a microphone combo on the very bottom here. The back just features some basic info about the projector itself, pretty generic stuff. Again, it doesn't support really 1080p output, it's really just input resolution, but everything else seems to be pretty well made, and overall I think that it's a decent design and easy, again, to tote with you for traveling purposes. Next, let's take a closer look at the user interface and how to access some of the core functions. A cold boot into Android takes roughly 1 minute to complete. Otherwise, we have a virtual screen size of about 20 inches being displayed right now, which is roughly 3 feet away from the projector unit itself. As always, I'm impressed with a Pico projector's clarity, its color saturation, and its accuracy for such a small size. Sure, you maybe get better performance with much larger and more professional-grade projectors on the market, but compared to other low-cost projectors that are probably, the size of a tablet, compared to something like this, which is really just the size of a smartphone, there's not a huge difference, and you can see that text is definitely legible if we zoom all the way in, and colors are actually pretty well balanced and accurate looking. So again, as long as you are in a fairly darkened environment, such as, right now we have the background lights completely turned off, you can see that text itself is definitely clear, and the unit itself does a pretty good job as far as producing realistic looking colors. One thing I do have to point out, though, is that the interface, although it's easy to navigate using the remote, isn't going to be the best to navigate with if you are always navigating through hyperlinks on the web browser. For that, I do recommend that you plug in a mouse using the USB port, or connect it using Bluetooth to a wireless mouse or a wireless keyboard for entering text more easily. You can see here that it has a pretty standard layout that offers some controls such as eShare, which is a proprietary app that you can use to connect a smartphone, both using the display and mirroring content, and also using your smartphone as the remote. So you can use the smartphone's touchscreen as the cursor for navigation and for presentations and the like. So that works pretty well, had no real issues there. You can scan the QR code and visit the link there to connect wirelessly to this application. Otherwise, there's also a YouTube client built right on in, although there are a few bugs that I found. For one, if you are navigating within YouTube and you want to go up and down through various videos, it actually isn't possible to do that using just the remote. And that's exemplified in this quick search query where I typed in OS reviews, and using the mouse I can only swipe left and right. You can see the blue cursor, the highlighted grayed out area where I'm moving left and right, but there's no physical way of moving down. Whereas using a mouse, you can see a cursor appear on screen, and it's a lot more flexible in terms of where it can go on screen. That seems to be a little bit of a limitation within the YouTube app that I found. Otherwise, you can also use the remote pretty easily for other things like navigating through Netflix and the browser. There's also access to quick versions of Facebook and Twitter if you want to quickly check your social media status. There's also Miracast as a more traditional method for wirelessly connecting the display from your phone onto the projector, and that works pretty well. However, there is a slight latency depending on your network speed. Since it's using Wi-Fi to wirelessly connect, it has to be on the same home wireless network. So depending on the speed of your Wi-Fi, if it's a little slower, sometimes the sound and the videos aren't going to be playing back at the same rate, which might be an issue if you're playing back some high action films. However, for presentations, that isn't so much of a problem. There's also AirPlay for wirelessly streaming audio if you want to do that. On the very top, the next tab takes you into the apps, where you can download more apps and go through your email settings. There's also music, a file browser for going through files when you have a hard drive or a thumb drive connected. There's also Smart Apps, which is a list of all your applications. You can see that there are a few bloatware installed, but for the most part, all the apps that are on here are fairly useful. There's access to a full version of the Play Store for downloading a virtually unlimited amount of Android apps that you may want to use for playing back games or watching video files. There's also additional APK installers, file managers that you can use. There's also a different launchers on here if you want to go through a more traditional Android interface as opposed to this watered down version, which is optimized for this mouse. And there's also other versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint editors, a regular Android browser, a calculator, a gallery, and AirPlay. So So all of these apps are displayed in a more traditional manner. Finally, in settings, I can connect the projector using Ethernet to the internet. I can toggle through Wi-Fi settings. I can change the display resolution. I can also go through advanced settings such as connectivity, device info, stuff like that, and also connecting it to other computers, mice, and optional accessories. So it works pretty well, and all in all, it's very intuitive and easy to get used to. Here's the eHome Media Center launcher, which is an even more watered-down version that takes you into just 3 things: a media player, a media server, and settings. Also gives you time and date info. But this allows me to quickly play back files loaded up onto an SD card or a thumb drive directly, and kind of in the way of a less intelligent manner. But you can see that it works pretty well, and for the most part it also allows me to toggle through the important information, and when I'm done I can also tap on home on the remote to go all the way back. So it works pretty well. The only real limitations I found when using this was maybe the 1 GB of RAM. This is using a quad-core processor clocked at roughly 1.2 GHz, which is speedy enough for most web browsing and some light gaming here and there, although again I recommend using your smartphone as the cursor as opposed to the built-in remote, since it's not an Air remote. But the 1 gig of RAM is a little bit limiting sometimes. If you're streaming back videos from YouTube at 1080p or 720p resolution, sometimes it will hang if you are playing back videos that are 2 or 3 hours long, and then you have to kind of close it up and then reopen up the program. Same thing with the web browsing. So there's are a little bit occasional cases of sluggishness that you'll encounter just because it's not running the most cutting edge of hardware on the market. But for most folks it will work without any problems, and the Wi-Fi connection seemed to be pretty strong and reliable. As far as browsing the web, it does a good job as well, although the utility is arguably not as high as watching videos or streaming content, since your smartphone will probably give you a better experience of web browsing than using a projector for that. But it works, and if you want to quickly bring up a link or a website for presentations, it works fairly well. Otherwise, going back home again, there's some additional info on the very top. You can see your battery status, connectivity status, and again, time and date. So a video playback test next. You can see that one of the limitations of this projector is that there's no correction for the keystone, for the angle. So if you have it tilted up at various degrees, there's no way of correcting it to make it a square if you're going from the bottom and projecting it all the way up and at a slanted angle. But otherwise, it works pretty well. You can hear that there is a built-in speaker, and although the volume output is decent, it's a little bit tinny in terms of its sound. However, it does work, and I would recommend connecting to an external speaker if possible. You can see that colors are pretty well balanced, they're accurate, and I can also scrub between different parts of the videos without that many problems. So it remains pretty fluid and responsive as long as your videos are short. If it's a longer video, sometimes it will slow down a bit more just because of that limited RAM. To say that the S6 projector is surprisingly decent. There are a few limitations that you have to be aware of. For one, you can't directly plug in an HDMI input, which might not be great for folks who want to plug in a DVD player or want to connect their laptop directly. However, with an Android built-in operating system, it already handles most of the tasks you want to do, such as web browsing and some light streaming from sites like YouTube, Netflix, and Kodi, which are built in. With that being said, this is probably best suited for some on-the-go performance, such as for presentations and for sharing videos with friends and family when you have maybe no direct access to a larger television display, as opposed to being a full projector replacement, just because, with a full-blown projector, you probably have a bit more versatility with connectivity and ports. With that being said, the eShare, Miracast, and AirPlay apps, which are integrated, already work quite well, and we also like the long battery life thanks to the Pico battery saving technology that they used on board. So all in all, for such a small little projector, it definitely exceeded my expectations as far as the performance of the video quality and the overall battery life. And I think that if you do need a dedicated Android projector that's small, compact, and lightweight, this is a good option to consider. You can check out more details in our upcoming written article, but for now this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been our quick video review of the S6 Mini Android Pico projector.